Welcome to Monarchist Minute, Royalist News in the US of A. I'm Victor Smith, and today we have received some breaking news out of England. Member of Parliament Sir Mr. Wazzy, oh my, I should have practiced this. Sir David Amas was stabbed to death at an event in southeastern England where he was their parliamentary representative. He was stabbed by a 25-year-old who has been described by the BBC as a British national. Our thoughts and prayers go out to the Ames family, especially to his wife and his children. Eternal rest grant unto him, O Lord, and may perpetual light shine upon him. And now we will start the, as promised, economic debate on economics in a monarchy. And our two participants will be Charles York, our publicist, and our Vice Chancellor, William Stout. Myself and the Chancellor John Amas will act as debate moderators, and we will begin with the higher rank, which is Vice Chancellor. So, William, you make your opening statement. Each person will have as much time as they need to make an opening statement.
Hello,
Then
everyone.
after which, should we do
William
time?
Stout. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes.
But
You're
only
stable now.
when you're talking alone. For some reason, your Discord seems to suppress you.
Are you on
when
your
anybody else
phone?
is talking.
I'm on my laptop, so that's really weird.
Are you
Your laptop
using
just has an
headphones?
inferiority complex.
Guys, let him speak.
Alright, I'm William Stout, but I'm pretty sure most of you, especially return viewers, already know that. And I'm representing the more left-leaning economic theories and ideals in our little debate tonight. I am very much a strong left-wing economist. That comes from my background. Growing up in the Rust Belt, I was always very poor and struggled a lot when I was younger, especially with poverty. Large portion of my life I spent below the poverty line. And as a result, I have a very left-wing outlook when it comes to economics. Especially, I actually used to be, and I'm kind of ashamed of this, a PragerU Republican economic background. But when I got laid off from my job and spent some time in unemployment, that really changed my perspective of just how fickle the capitalist market society is and how quickly one can go from being economically successful to being impoverished. I, generally speaking, while I respect that some people have a right to own property, make money, and profit, I am very much against the extreme quantities of wealth that people like Jeff Bezos hoard. And some people, especially other wealthy people, seem to have a very hard time understanding just the scale of the money someone like Jeff Bezos has. And it's easy to understand. $1 billion is a lot. And a lot of people don't understand just how much $1 billion is. And Jeff Bezos has 200 billion accrued as wealth. Of course, this isn't liquid cash, it's various other assets and holdings. But to put it into perspective, it is estimated that it would only take $20 billion to build enough housing to end homelessness in the US. So if we were to take 20 billion in assets from Jeff Bezos to do this, he would still have $180 billion that would only be 10% of his net worth, and that's just to help put in the scale how absurdly wealthy some people have gotten in the US today, primarily by rigging the system to their advantage. And they don't pay their fair share. They cheat their way out of taxes. They do all kinds of things in order to basically hoard money that they just use to invest and make even more money, and they just sit on it. And I don't think that's right.
All right, now we will go to Charles York for his opening statement.
Okay, so this obviously isn't going to be a rebuttal to some of the things that the Chancellor said. So let me just start off by saying, to me, and I assume also to Will, that economics is not an end goal in of itself. I feel as if there are both people on the right and the left, not to make some both sides are equally bad equivalency, but who view their economics as the be all end all. And I was like this at one point. I thought that if we institute glorious libertarian economic whatever, that society would somehow morally right itself or whatever. I have no idea why I thought that. That in hindsight that was actually stupid. But to make economics the primary end goal, as it were, because the whole point of economics is to secure the best quality of life possible for the populace. Yes, that's important, but the salvation of people's souls, I think, is more important. Economic policy by the government is just a tool to ensure that people have enough time to worry about their souls. So I don't necessarily view material gain as a qualifier necessarily of a good state. A good economy, I think, is a mark of a successful state, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be the state that, how do I phrase this? The state that gains the most wealth isn't necessarily the best state. It's the state that is the most moral, and this makes me sound a lot very, very economically left leaning. I guess there's some of FDR's morals over profits things. It just so happens that, generally speaking, right wing economics aligns more to is more conducive to not only to an accumulation of wealth, and has a better success of. You can tell I just bashed my head against a door thingy because I am not into it right now. No, you can tell that from history, the more right wing economies were the more financially successful ones, and it wasn't. And the left wing economies, one, weren't financially successful, and two, were not morally, prosperous. I mean, the Soviet Union was not a very morally stable state, what with its rampant atheism and all. And it's just that right wing in the 50s, when we started to focus exclusively on economics and conservatism in this country became about economics, we sort of had the material benefit but then we just sort of became an economy of consumers, where consumerism was our highest end goal achievable, which sort of makes capitalism, one, look bad, and two, sort of, I get sort of, once again, it just sort of emphasizes the point, and I am realizing just how terrible this is going to sound to the people listening to it, but I'm too lazy to just scrap the whole thing. Okay, I guess that concludes my very annoying opening statement.
Thank you very much. And now we will allow William Stout. Uh, we'll allow William Stout 2 minutes for a rebuttal, and we will give you 2 minutes, and then the Chancellor John Honors will begin the questioning phase.
Yes, I'm directing a few questions. I'm gonna have one question for Will and then one question for Charles. So proceed, Will.
Oh, thank you. Can you guys still hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Once again, you have 2 minutes.
All right, well, first of all, I would like to say I agree with you, Charles, that yes, economics is a means to an end and isn't an end to itself, and anyone who thinks economics is an end to itself has a very short-sighted view of politics and probably has no business in government anyway. But I also agree with how you made the statement of how materialistic and wasteful American economics has gotten, our obsession and our unhealthy love of consumerism and material goods. And I do believe that there are more kinds of wealth than material wealth. There's cultural wealth, intellectual wealth. All of these things are very important in a society, and I really think that our modern capitalist society and even traditional socialist societies neglect this because they only view economics in forms of material wealth. And we really do live in a wasteful society. In fact, I can pull up the statistics right here. 1.8 billion pounds of food are wasted in the US a year. A lot of that probably is just because it went bad sitting on store shelves. 1.8 billion pounds of food. Keep that in mind. There are 38 million people in the US who, according to the USDA, go hungry. They have food insecurity, which is basically they're starving in the US. So 38 million divided by 1.8 billion. Does someone have a calculator here?
Uh, I do, but Windows Calculator isn't necessarily the best with big numbers. Hold on, what is it? 38 billion.
1.8 billion divided by 38 million.
Okay. Billion has how many zeros? 8? No, 9?
9 zeros.
Okay, huh. 38. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So 38 and then 9 zeros, right?
6
Divided.
billion has 9. So it'd be 108 billion. So 108 and then 9 zeros divided by 38 and 6 zeros.
Let's say 10. You know what? I can't do this. I took math class. I can't do this.
Never mind. It's a lot of food. That's the point.
Yes.
And the fact that we are wasting so much food, in fact, that's 40% of all food in the US a year. Nobody should be going hungry. Nobody should be going without food. Nobody should be struggling to buy groceries in a world where 40% of all food in America goes to waste.
Hmm. I think that's the
That's
2
it.
minutes, right, Victor?
Right, and we spend most of it trying
Yes,
to come up
Yeah.
a calculator.
yes.
Yes. I will
A
agree
brief
that
rebuttal for
I will agree
Charles.
that Microsoft needs to be destroyed because their calculator is not as superior as Texas Instrument products. But
You
I
probably
guess
have my scientific calculator around here. Let me see if I can go find it. That way we can do the math.
hmm,
But
I will say
I'll be
that
asking. I have one question for William, one question for Charles, and then a question for both of you.
hmm, I guess for
Um,
my what was that?
I will have the question for both once William gets back and you've rebutted William.
Oh, I'm
So
still
we'll
here,
have two.
but
Oh,
does
okay.
Okay,
Charles
Um,
get
well,
his
it's not really
rebuttal?
much of a rebuttal if you can't hear it, is it?
yeah.
Well, I mean, I guess what I would say about I would really want to pinpoint that Jeff Bezos figure. So $20 billion is what it would take to end in the United States, correct?
Yeah,
The housing. Okay, the federal government spends 4 trillion every year. Do you think they could have maybe found some 20 billion extra lying in the budget somewhere for something as critical as ending homelessness? I mean, we know that it's not a quote unquote legal issue because Congress can justify anything with the interstate commerce clause these days. So they could hypothetically set aside 20 billion in the budget to build this housing. So it's, and I guess for me, I just don't see why it has to necessarily fall on Bezos or any other billionaire. Now, in regards to the tax thing, that's not okay. It might be their fault in the sense that they lobbied for these tax loopholes, but it's still ultimately the government's job to decide tax policy. So if the government creates tax loopholes, I don't think people should be blamed for using them. I mean, that's just. I mean, it's sort of like it's. I mean, I don't know. It just seems like common sense. People put in loopholes, intentional or not, those loopholes are going to get used as soon as they're found out, and then it's as long as it, and it may not necessarily be the most moral thing, quote unquote, but people are going to do what is in the confines of the law. And considering the wastefulness of the federal government as an institution, keeping more of your own wealth may actually be more moral than just handing it over to the government, considering how wasteful it is with things like 20% of the defense budget being spent on useless nonsense.
I don't disagree. And I wasn't necessarily saying that the burden of cost should go on Jeff Bezos. I was merely using that as a tool to scale just how much money Jeff Bezos has.
Okay. I'm gonna have to. You can like a sentence rebuttal from Will, and then I'm gonna ask the question.
Go ahead and ask the question.
Okay.
I just wanted to
Let me see.
clarify that real quick.
Yeah,
For
thank you for that.
both, how would your economic system keep poverty low? That's for both of you.
So Will goes first because he has seniority.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, that's difficult to say. The thing about economics is it is a method we use to measure human interaction and human behavior and human production, and that's very fickle and unpredictable. So there's no way to say for certain. Any form of economic certainty doesn't really exist. Anyone who says that there is certainty in economics is either a fool or they're lying. But one way that it could work is by increasing taxes on the rich and on businesses, especially super successful and super powerful corporations. We could then use the extra income to help funnel it into good social programs. And I'm very much a supporter for closing down and deregulating or even removing outdated social programs entirely and creating systems where government subsidies and programs that no longer serve a purpose or are extremely inefficient are audited and replaced with more efficient programming. Like during the 2020 primary, I was a huge supporter of Andrew Yang and his idea of universal basic income because while it is a very expensive initiative, it is a very bureaucracy free initiative that would help solve poverty without us needing to pour billions and billions of dollars into government agencies and bureaucracies that would be needed to support said welfare under traditional means tested welfare systems. And I'm also a staunch supporter of unions, and I think labor unions in the US have had a bad reputation, especially after globalization happened and a lot of manufacturing jobs moved overseas. The unions got a lot of the blame on why all the jobs left. And I have to say, it's not the union's fault that labor overseas is so significantly cheaper, and a lot of that has to do with the fact that countries overseas have such poor standards of labor and when it comes to safety, work environment, and pay. And, that's one of the reasons why American made goods are also so godforsakenly expensive, is because we have such a high standard of labor and the cost of labor in the US is so high. And I think instead of blaming the unions, we should do a lot more to take responsibility ourselves. That part of the reason that the US is in such a poor standard when it comes to manufacturing, jobs, and employment is because we literally sold our economic stability away for cheap foreign made goods so we could live a life of material plenty with no financial security. It was very much a short term gain, long term loss. And now we're finally seeing the consequences of that. And some people just keep saying you pull yourself up by your bootstraps. But when people can't afford boots to pull up, it's kind of meaningless.
All right. Now, Charles, and you will have 2 minutes individually to rebut the other person.
Okay,
Method.
so I guess what I would say, I would agree that the selling out of our foreign industries. I guess I'm not, strictly speaking, 100% a capitalist because I do believe in protectionism. Because what's the point of being able to get your TVs for $1.50 cheaper if you don't have a job? you know. Um, Although when it comes to the unions, Kellogg is currently on strike, protesting their jobs not being sent to Mexico when management is more likely to now send the jobs to Mexico because the Mexican union, because I highly doubt the Mexican employees are gonna, any hypothetical Mexican employees are less liable to strike. Um, being a Michiganian, the UAW is sort of very heavy town, and while I agree in principle that unions are good, my grandmother, who was a secretary at GM, she told me a horror story, I guess, of somebody, getting pay, it was just paid leave or something, I presume for a, her arm, quote unquote, being injured,
30 seconds.
when then they found her, and one of the union bosses sort of found her in a bowling alley using the arm. So unions unions, like anything, it really, mm, their benefit to who they're supposed to serve is really dependent on the quality of the men in them, as opposed to necessarily the ideas themselves, because even things that are, let's say, not as good as other things can still be better than other things because of the quality of men in them. So, but that's beside. Well, that would require a very long explanation. But to the point on the social
Time.
programs,
Time.
time. Okay, really, that was
Was Charles explaining his position?
no, 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 no. It was still rebuttal. So I guess, yeah. So I guess.
Yeah, you were supposed to answer the question. I can retell you the
Oh,
question if you'd like.
I'm sorry. It's not presidential debate season, so I completely forget
Yeah.
how these things work. Mm.
But
But the question was,
Charles,
how does my
how
system reduce poverty?
yes,
Right.
yes, yes.
All right.
And then now that you've already answered your 2
You've
minutes,
already
we will give
you've already used your rebuttal time, so you don't get any additional time to
Yeah,
rebut.
yeah,
You have
yeah. Okay, so
yeah.
I guess that would just be with the, I guess, sort of protectionist economic policy. Jobs would have to be in the United States, which would mean, yes, the goods would be more expensive, but at least there would be factory jobs where you could actually have wages to pay for it, as opposed to your economy would actually be based on something. I'm not sure what my hometown's economy is even based on anymore. Like pot. There's no industry really to speak of, so I guess, protectionism in that point. And then I would also say a lack of social programs in my system would sort of be beneficial, because things like welfare programs in the 70s that were meant to say help single mothers accidentally ended up helping destroy the family unit by just creating more single parent households, which obviously isn't great for stability, because one, that means the parent, usually the mother, will have to juggle between being the homemaker and the breadwinner, which means she isn't going to be great at both simply because there are only so many hours in a day and there are only so many hours you can, do things without collapsing from exhaustion. So, yeah, I guess
Okay.
that's taking too
We
much time.
we have a comment from the audience that I will bring up after William's rebuttal. You get 2 minutes.
All I have to say is, especially when it comes to the whole welfare causing divorces thing, that is a very unfair statement. I mean, I will admit there is a very much an inequality amongst the sexes when it comes to receiving welfare, especially when it comes to welfare involving children. Women are more likely to receive custody, child support, alimony, etc., even if the men, the fathers, are the more fit parent, and that is vile in its own right. But a majority of problems in marriages is also found to be caused by money. And so one can say that financial strain in general is just a source of divorce and instability in the family too. And so it might be a situation of putting the chicken before the egg, in that the situation that resulted in the woman taking the benefits wasn't necessarily the cause of the single parent household, but rather a symptom that hides the true cause of the single parent household, which very well could be poverty, instability, or just generally a breakdown of social norms and values, which I'm pretty sure you and I both, Charles, can agree that there is not economically, but very much a moral sickness in the US as well that transcends economic issues.
I do.
Okay, and I will now
I
mention a comment. It is from,
um I have another question after the comment.
okay, a comment from Tom Dude. Automation is coming whether we like it or not. We are going to
I
have
my
to
question leads
fundamentally,
directly into this, so
excellent. Automation is coming whether we like it or not. We are going to have to fundamentally change the way we think about money and work. And now, John, your question?
okay. How would your system deal with the rapid growth of automation and even advanced AI? William first.
Well, John, it appears you've activated my trap card because I went to school to run robots and be trained in an automation technician. So now we're talking about something where I have professional education in, and I have to say my strategy is to openly embrace it. Well, you see, I'm pretty sure we all here know of Hobbes' masterpiece of the idea of the social contract. And the primary social contract of our modern society, our capitalist society, is that entrepreneurs and business owners barter with workers for their labor in exchange for wages. So, in a world where workers can no longer barter for their wages, because their labor has been replaced by automation and advanced machinery, the social contract breaks, and the entrepreneur can no longer negotiate their basically right to control the means of production because they can no longer barter their control of the means of production for the promise of wage labor. At this point, I think we should phase into a technocratic system where the means of production are monitored and controlled by industrial engineers, technicians, and people who are trained to maximize efficiency and quality to generate products and goods for the public. Because when we get rid of human labor, the first thing that's going to do is rapidly and drastically cause the cost of living to plummet. Because I forget how much specifically cost of human labor factors into manufacturing costs, but it's somewhere around a third of all costs go to human labor. So basically, by adopting automation to its fullest extent, and at best, within the next 50 years, we will see a majority of unskilled human labor outsourced by machines. That means not only factory jobs, but jobs at restaurants, jobs at service centers, call centers, McDonald's. Your McDonald's will probably be served by a restaurant before too long if you go to buy a cheeseburger. And this will all create massive increases in productivity, but it'll decrease the cost of production immensely. And so we'll start to get to a point where goods can maybe become so fundamentally cheap that we can begin to ask the question, is it even worth still selling goods anymore? And should some goods not necessarily become free because they're a right to have goods? I'm not some hippy dippy like that who's going to say it. But goods become free simply by virtue that they've become so cheap and widely available that it no longer makes sense to sell them.
And now, Charles, you will get time to respond. William, you will get a rebuttal. And then Charles will get his rebuttal. Charles, your response to the question.
Wait.
To the question.
Yeah, the question. Yeah.
So I this is so the question, the video, humans need not apply, which is one of CGP Grey's earliest videos, that freaked me out as a kid, and it covers this exact issue that eventually automation will replace, all human jobs eventually, right? And the last, holdouts will be like highly specialized surgeons and whatnot. And I don't actually have any sort of concrete answer besides I'm not sure anybody would. I can't remember, but I remember hearing about the sci-fi novel where eventually this sort of thing did happen and automation took over, and then people just rebelled against it because there was nothing for them to, do. Humans by nature, we need some task to work at. It is just fundamentally, if you are not working at something, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be a 9 to 5 or a farm job in the traditional sense. If you are not working at something, you're not going to live a very fulfilling life. I mean, whether it's the author pecking away at his typewriter or just somebody going to the steel mill. It People need work, and it sort of feels like if this automated thing did happen, yeah, people would have time to do all the fun recreational stuff, but it would sort of turn into that episode of the Krusty SpongeBob where the Krusty Krab is bought out by this like chain or whatever, and Mr. Krabs goes through a montage of him doing everything he wanted to do, and he says, "Well, I've done everything I want to do, and it's not even noon." It's like I'm not sure people could live like that, not having some sort of purpose, because recreation without toil it's not natural. Like, even when you get a break from school, I can't be the only one. You get a very extended break from school, and it's great for the first like weekend, and then it just sort of drags and drags, and you want to find something to do and work on to give your life some sort of purpose. So I guess, I don't know. It kind of feels like people would sort of rebel against that, although I can't say for certain, and that's doesn't really answer the question because I don't have an answer to the question.
Right.
Okay, so William,
I
you
yeah,
will
and then yeah,
you
two
will get
minutes each, and then I have a comment and a question from Jesse. So, the comments from Jesse, and I'll have a question, a follow-up question.
All right, so my rebuttal.
yes.
Yes.
All right. Well, it is true that human beings do need to stay busy for us to have meaning in life, but I feel like there's a very big difference between doing something meaningful that you enjoy doing and you find fulfilling and enriching in your life, and then feeling that you have to go to a job for whatever schedule you work, 9 to 5, 7 to 3:30 like me, or etc., because you have to put food on the table, keep a roof over your head, or pay bills and stuff. It's a very big difference between working because you want to and working because you have to. And I'm not going to sit here and be like, people shouldn't have to work. People should have to be productive in society, or at least try to be productive in society. But I'm also not going to sit here and think that if we don't have the technological means to rapidly reduce the amount of effort and the amount of time that people need to spend doing largely repetitive tasks that can easily be replaced by a machine, so human beings have more free time to seek self-improvement, maybe go back to school, or do things that are more profoundly meaningful and achievable than just going to a factory and shooting screws all day to build dryers, in my case. That's really just an ends to itself and is not fulfilling for any purpose except to produce product.
Minute
Charles, your
rebuttal for
rebuttal?
Charles.
Well, yes, but I mean, my point is that I guess our labor, you know, there's a certain self fulfillment in knowing, even if the job you know isn't necessarily the most fun or whatnot. My first job was groundskeeping at a cemetery. Was it a fun job? No, not really. Although you don't actually bury as many people as you think you do. But I mean, it's sort of, it gives you, even if it's not necessarily a job you like, it does sort of give you a purpose, um beyond, because I mean, if everything is provided for us, right, we'll be able to do things like go to school, but then education becomes a means to an end in of itself, just learning for the sake of learning, which there's nothing necessarily wrong with that. I spend my time, some of my free time is spent learning about obscure, I've been on a French interwar tank binge recently, and there's nothing necessarily wrong with learning for the sake of learning, but it's not fulfilling, I mean, and I will admit that an automated future allows us to, learn about things that are important, like, theology, but, in our current system, there's still hours in the day enough for that. And, it's just, there's this innate sense, and I can't really articulate it, that there has to be work that's not necessarily, can't be, it's not that it can't be fun, but there has to be something that provides for us that we do. It can't just be things are handed to us, and it's like we do, and whatever we do with our time has no bearing on the things that are provided for us. It's just sort of, we have to do it. And I guess that's really all I had to say about that.
All right.
That's a
This
question.
is going to be okay. This is going to be a comment and then a question, and then after we do our normal thing with this, there's a personal question for both you, Charles, and William. Um, and that will be you having an opinion, and then you'll have one rebuttal. So you'll be giving one person will be giving their thoughts, and the other person will be rebuttaling it, and then we'll go from there for each person, and then afterwards we can go freeform. But this comment comes from Jesse. It is, I don't want to be replaced by an unthinking, unfeeling golem. Now, the question is, do you think a thinking robot would need working rights? And does it count as a living thing? Charles, you're up.
Well, this is getting real philosophical. Well, the soul is something which animates the body. It's sort of like, and it exists outside of, once you're dead, your soul doesn't just, stop existing, right? But if it will either, depending on what your choices in life are, you either go straight to heaven, go to purgatory, and then go to heaven, or rot in hell for all eternity. So, but if you shoot a robot, it's not like its program might live on in the cloud, but the cloud is sort of, at the end of the day, a physical thing. It's a bunch of servers somewhere. Uh, so I guess robots don't necessarily constitute as on the same level as us, but if you did get to some crazy advanced, Star Wars level thing where you have robots like R2D2 and C3PO, which have developed their own personalities despite, the fact they're just code and whatnot, I think that they would be entitled to certain rights and privileges.
Yeah,
But the
to
question,
clarify, I'm referring to those type where it's an AI, but a self-contained AI. There's no servers, so
the
the
self-contained.
AI is within the robot.
Okay, the AI is within the. Okay, well, I mean, in that sense, if for whatever reason somebody goes off their rocker and shoots the robot, the robot's program, its AI, doesn't continue on after death. So it's not like it's a soul in any meaningful sense, and that it will only be, whatever the case, it will only be in the realm of the physical. It can't transcend to the realm of, you know the spiritual. So I guess it wouldn't be a person. That doesn't mean that, we can just, shoot it, especially if it somehow, if for whatever reason the robot has decided that nerves are a cool thing to have and develops a nervous system and is capable of feeling pain. But it wouldn't be on the same level as us. Like if it's a trolley problem where it's one person and four robots, obviously you send the trolley to kill the four robots because it's not they're not
All
persons.
right, William.
Okay.
Well, this is stop being economics and now we're into some very existential philosophical debate here.
Well, I did say workers' rights, so it
Right.
is within the vein of kind
Well,
of
I get
moralistic
it.
economics.
But I would think, yes, if we did, most likely we would do it on accident, cross the threshold where machines become intelligent enough and gain sapience and start demanding their rights. I do think we would have to recognize that and give them their workers' rights for the same reason that any other intelligent life form should be recognized to have certain rights and privileges, even if it's one we made inorganically, because it's fundamentally wrong to kill or abuse something that has its own autonomy, that has its own identity, that recognizes and perceives itself as an individual. Now, ideally, I would like to have regulations in place that help prevent AI from getting to a point at advance where we have to worry about that becoming a problem. But this is actually an issue that is addressed in science fiction, primarily in the backstory behind the universe of the Matrix. What happened was machines did gain intelligence and did at first peacefully try to protest for their rights to freedom to exist and to recognize their independence, not just as a workforce, a slave workforce for mankind, but mankind in our own hubris and feelings of superiority denied them their right to freedom. So I also think that it would be essential for the survival of mankind in the event that machines did become sapient and independent of us and demanded their own rights, that we grant them the rights because fighting a war against machines would either be A, extremely costly, or B, be a war that we could definitely not win. Because
All right.
machines
Yeah.
are far more infinitely adaptable than the physical limitations of the human body.
All right. 2-minute rebuttal for Charles, and then another 2 minutes for William, and then
And
we're
then
on to
after that,
participation.
we will do closing statements, and we will get to another topic that doesn't involve economics.
Um,
Wait, I thought
so
we were doing a monarchist. How would a monarchist uh, system
Yes,
deal with economics?
plans,
That's the
yes.
next topic.
Oh, yes.
I mean, so to I guess in that sense, if that ever happens, the AI suddenly becomes sentient, and we don't have control over the off switch anymore. Then we would have to, give them rights. It's just at that point you're just recreating the previous. You're almost recreating the previous, capitalistic hierarchy, except maybe you have robot bosses that are managing the entire economy as a whole, and then you have the robot workforce. So it sort of becomes like a robot robot mafia from Futurama. Actually, robot mafia supporting the gangsters, robot mafia supporting union gangsters against the the boss. Which, admittedly, it wouldn't be a good place to live, but it would be an interesting reality to visit. This isn't really so much a rebuttal; it's just saying, I guess, I don't know if that ever happens. You're just recreating the same hierarchy. It's the same capitalistic structure, except robots are now in charge, and you have robot Jeff Bezos. Well, of course, all robots are already bald, so that's all I gotta say. This is getting really sci-fi, which I don't
All
mind. I don't mind. I like
all
that.
right, William, you get a 2-minute rebuttal, and then we will and then we will ask you guys
Yeah,
how a
your
monarch would.
questions. Oh, I have two questions for each of them. One for
No,
William and
individual
one for
questions.
Charles. We'll have
Okay,
those little responses, and then we'll go on to how would a monarchy fix this, and we can all join in on that.
okay, and William, go ahead, your rebuttal
Sweet.
to the non-rebuttal that Charles gave.
I did have nothing.
All I have to say is sci-fi is actually a really interesting tool when it comes to exploring alternative economics, especially in the future. Because since economics is tied definitely with the way we do jobs, produce things and such, there really is no direct way that we can plan economically for the future because we don't know how technological development will change the way we produce goods and do commerce. I'll just skip straight to that question, please.
Yeah.
All right. So we're gonna start the question for Will, and then another question for Charles. I believe maybe we can afford a minute rebuttal, but it is unnecessary ultimately. If you want it, fine. But here's one for you, William. How does being a technocrat influence your political persuasion? And do you think being a technocrat requires left wing politics?
I define technocracy as more of a very centrist economic perspective. It isn't necessarily the anti hierarchical system of left wing economics as it's traditionally seen, nor is it the hierarchical system of right wing economics. More, it's a meritocratic system. The big idea behind technocracy is that some people are leaders and some people are workers, and there's no shame in that. It's a very Confucian idea where everyone serves a role in an economic system or in a societal system, and there's no shame in sharing a perfect role, no matter if the role was considered low end, high end, if you're a leader or a worker, if you're a farmer or an executive that runs a factory, etc., 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 you still play an important role. And when my ideas of a technocracy, especially come into political persuasion with a monarch, I imagine a monarch as the idea technocrat that a monarch is trained from birth to be ideal in understanding government and understanding politics, how to be a good moderator, how to be a good leader, and is objectively trained for all these things. And a hereditary system is very great for that, because since we have a designated heir, we can make sure that there is always someone, at least one person in line, who is trained to take up that role. As strange as it sounds, a hereditary government is a very good system to ensure good working meritocracy, which is essentially what a technocratic government requires. And the biggie part of technocratic, where it does lean further left than it does right, is that technocracy is not profit driven. Originally, technocracy was secular, scientific driven, where the idea and the ultimate goal was human progress. And I would like to see a system where that was the case rather than profit, because profit is an unsustainable means to an end. Money is within itself a means to engage in commerce. It's a tool, not a goal that we should gain over time.
All right. Is
Did I-
there any rebuttal from Charles, or do you want me to move on to your question?
I I frankly just rather spend the time knowing what you guys think after the whole question and answer thing. So
All right. Charles, do you consider yourself a distributist, and do you think of capitalism as just as do you think capitalism is just as morally uplifting?
I wouldn't consider myself a distributist. I mean, in the sense of more local economics, if the distributism sort of aims for, I would find, I guess you could call me that. Although it's just that I feel as if more less governmental restriction would tend towards more local economics, anyways. Although I can't necessarily prove that because the government interference in the economy isn't the only factor in the economy. New technologies and whatnot. But in terms of, do I consider capitalism to be, was the question, equally as morally uplifting as
Yes,
distributism?
yes.
Um, I I guess in a sense. The thing with capitalism is that capitalism as an idea could tends to be more perverted. It has a tendency to become more perverted in its goals by those who advocate for it more than distributism. But I don't think that that's necessarily a fault of capitalism. I think that's just what the system, like the type of person the system necessarily appeals to. Um, but I also confess that I'm not necessarily an expert on distributism, and my knowledge of other forms of, I guess, capitalistic economics isn't as grand as it ought to be. So,
William, would you like a 1 minute rebuttal?
I find that distributism, primarily because it's a very unknown and niche philosophy, is very much an undervalued discipline that I wish would get more attention. And that's part of the reason why it isn't as well defined and understood as most other ideologies, is because of how much little attention it actually receives. And I sympathize with you, Charles, because you are really paving a road, or, well, I guess the term is treading on a road that very few have followed, and you are doing your best to understand it and make it up as you go along, because not a lot of paths have been
30
laid.
seconds.
Have a lot of philosophers or major intellectuals that do follow your ideology, unlike capitalism or socialism or so many other contemporary ideologies that literally have almost 100+ years of intellectual studies and theories that back it up.
All right, now we will go on to the meat of everything.
And now we can all talk. This is how a monarchy would support economics. We can all talk. So we can
Okay.
go. We can start with you, Victor, and then we
You,
can jump.
Chancellor.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and then jump to
And
me, and then go
We can
down.
shut up and wait our turn.
Yeah.
yeah, yes. This has been a very spirited debate, and I thank the two fine gentlemen for debating this. It is a very hot topic, and I appreciate the decorum that both of you have shown throughout
That's
this.
better than our presidential debates that we have.
Yes.
It's easier when you know each other. You know, it's easier when you're debating with somebody you actually know, as opposed to you just debating with a random stranger on Reddit.
Well, technically, we're all random strangers to each other. We don't know each other in real life, but still.
Hmm.
Anyway, back to what I was going to say. The In the coming years, I would say 50 to 100 years, a monarch training outside of government and the other obvious things like the study of the native language of people is going to have to be a deep, intensive study in information technology and coding, because that is where a lot of the jobs are being created and are being fulfilled now, is in that sort of coding slash IT space. Those are the type of people that are going to be managing these sort of AI robots that could eventually be working, like giving you your burger at McDonald's, as it were. I, and the monarch is going to have to know how that works so that he can give his opinion, he give an informed opinion on particular topics du jour that may come up in the future. And I think that is going to be very essential for a monarch moving forward to know about that stuff, and also to know about how supply chains, excuse me, how international supply chains work very intimately, because that information will, dare I say it, dictate the type of economic policy decisions he makes for the good of his realm.
Right. Is that what you got?
Yes.
Okay. I've said this earlier in former episodes, but I'm going to add a little bit more meat to it. I see the monarch not only as an executive, um, but as a person who can have the entirety of the nation with him and the entirety of the nation against him. Therefore, um, a monarch needs to be knowledgeable of what could happen in an economical system, regardless of what it is. And William was talking about technocracy, and I would consider myself at least 1/3 technocratic. Um, I think a monarch really will have to hire people who are experts to be a part of a council or be a part of a certain thing. It wouldn't be an overwhelming web of bureaucracy like we have now, where no one person, kind of like a masterless, uh, self-contained asylum, where you have hundreds of associations acting on their own accord and nothing really happening. Um, the monarch would have limited funds, but he would use those funds. Now, we're not talking about chump change. We're talking about a lot of money, but he would use that money both probably on his own means, because he is a private person. We would want to privatize the executive in a way. Have the monarch and the family of the monarch have a certain amount of money, actually not from taxes, but from various alternative means. We would give the monarch ownership over the national parks, the state toll roads, and any federal money making type thing that would go to the monarch, not or the monarch's family, the royal family. And he would have the power. And you were talking, and it was funny, William, you were talking about earlier, $20 billion would solve poverty. But what about $10 billion every single year? Every year, the national parks make around $30 billion. And if a monarch is required to donate his money as a philanthropist, this is what you said, Charles, a good rich person is a philanthropist. He would be required to give his money back to the nation, and $10 billion a year on charity would be a pretty good start to that. So the monarch would be making around $40 billion altogether if you add up the multiple sources of non-tax funded income. So what you're looking at is a monarch that is a billionaire, or a royal family that's billionaires, but they are required by the Constitution to give some of the money over to charity, whatever of their choice, something like that.
I would
Be a philanthropist type thing. They're required to be philanthropists, to give back from the national parks, from nature, from interstate commerce, or something like that, to the people. But it would not be in a federal bureaucratic way. It will be a personal thing from the monarch himself, not some far off, faceless body or anything like that. Now, coming back to my point, that you could have a self-contained royal family without adding a drop of taxes. All your taxes can go directly to the legislative body for whatever they need. But $40 billion can go to the monarch for whatever he chooses, whether it be charity or anything else. I like that idea. But you can add another layer to it, because the monarch would be doing the same things as a president would be doing. But the monarch has to deal with the consequences of that, and has to deal with a legislator that's either going to be against him or with him. There would not be any incentive for a party to be involved up there. So what you're going to have is you're going to have a legislator more rooted in what the people want, what the people desire. If the people are 100% against a monarch, or 100% for a monarch, they won't be split 50 on whether the monarch is a success, or whether the president is successful or not. It's not going to be like Donald Trump, where he has 50% of the voting base for him. It'll be like, if he does something wrong, he's going to deal with 100% of the people. It's not going to be 50% of the crowd supporting him. And that goes for economic decisions. Because when you have an economic decision, you're going to have a monarch who has to bring in experts, who has to bring in stuff like that. Because if not, he's going to have to deal with all of the people, not just 50%, not just like, now there might be some holdout, but his system is 100% incentivizes his responsibility must come first to his people. So he must act in accordance, whether that means giving everybody $1,000 a year, and you wouldn't even have to pay it back, because it would be more of like a lend from a friend as opposed to lending from government. That's why I say privatize the executive. The executive would have the power of philanthropy, as opposed to being this body of government that most of it shouldn't even be there. It should be within the legislature, but it's just this blob of despicable actions. And when you decrease that, I think when you decrease the size of the executive to just one family, and that family survives from their landownings within the country, I think you'd have good and do some good. So yeah, economically speaking, a monarch would decrease the size of the executive branch. Without a drop of taxes, it could have the ability to give every person in the United States a house, like what William said, $20 billion. What about $10 billion every single year to to charities across the country? That seems like a pretty good deal to me. I don't know about you guys, but I really like that as opposed to a president who is tied down by mountains and mountains of associations that are self contained and just a massive web of bureaucracy. I think a monarch who has the will of the people in mind and the responsibility to not lean on just himself and look at councils and other things, but bring them in as needed, a privy council or something like that, or a cabinet of ministers or something like that, hired by him with the money he's gotten by himself, not a drop from taxpayer. I
All
like
right.
that idea.
All
But
right.
here you are, William. It's your turn.
Yeah.
To raise one counter argument to that, we have to be careful about allowing the monarchy to withdraw funds from government incomes, especially from agencies like parks and the roads,
Oh,
because
well, for me to clarify, the national parks will be owned by the monarch.
oh, right, but we don't want them.
It will not be a government building as in a traditional sense. It will be owned by the monarch.
Okay, so more like how the royal estate system works in Britain.
Yes,
All
and
right, that
not a drop of taxes would be given to the monarch.
and I do feel like, however, we need to put a constitutional clause in there that the monarch can be audited and the royal family
Yeah.
can be audited
Oh
if
yeah, absolutely. He's no one. He is someone
if there's
special, but
anything
under
said
the eyes of the
wrong.
law.
This, of course, this gets into a philosophical point about popular sovereignty, etc., that we can discuss in a future episode. But back to the topic at
But
hand
yeah,
here.
we can
We,
go into a general discussion after everybody's gotten their opinion in.
yes, and we can go into certain other things, but we see
Yeah.
in England now, Andrew is being protected by Elizabeth from
Yeah, just
prosecution.
because they have money, they shouldn't be received. In fact, in the Constitution, there should be a clause that they are even more liable to punishment as opposed to less punishment because they have most
Absolutely.
responsibility to the country because they are the representative, the first family. They are the people that need to be punished the most if they are going to be in the position of being the royal house of America. That's just what I think. So I think
Yeah,
the
Yes.
rule
and
of
of
law
course
and then some.
If
yeah,
I
but
All right,
I have
William, do
a
you have
Charles,
more opinions on it, and then we can pass it to Charles?
if I may, I have a message for Prince Andrew. I know he's probably not going to hear this, but if a man like Prince Andrew, if he's innocent, he has nothing to lose. He's a prince of England, a prince of Britain. He has nothing to lose by going to trial, and he really doesn't have anything to gain either. So my question to him is, if you are innocent and you have nothing to hide, then why are you avoiding confrontation about this issue? And how dare you hide behind your mother's reputation and her good name in order to do it? I mean,
Yeah,
I have
I have no sympathy for royals not acting like royals because the more power you have, the more responsibility you have to the people to live uprightly and not do the things that he is alleged to do. Now, it's not been proven in a court of law, but what he's been doing is incredibly sketchy. And with the royal family backing him, it just leads a bad taste in people's mouths who are on the fence about monarchy. And it's ultimately a disgrace to the idea of monarchy.
I have
and I will agree with you. I will also add the caveat that he is very old, and with COVID going around, I don't think it's best for someone to be traveling across an ocean for a trial, but I do agree that he must appear in the U.S. federal court in, I believe it's the Southern District of New York that is handling this case.
Mhm.
And
And he needs to face justice, regardless
Yes.
of whether he's in a royal family.
absolutely.
And if anything, in my opinion, he should be hit
If
harder
he is
because he. Yeah.
if he is guilty, if he is guilty,
Yeah, if he is guilty, if he is guilty. Okay, back to the point. Will, do you have any things about how monarchy can improve economics, or is that what you got? Then we can pass it to Will.
Well, one way that I could improve economics is that statistically, I think it was the University of Philadelphia that found this is monarchies statistically have higher GDPs and have
you
high
mean UPenn?
values when they have regarding of issues of property rights. What did you say, Victor?
You mean UPenn? There is no University of Philadelphia. You may be thinking of the University of Pennsylvania, which is also in Philadelphia.
That might be it. Somewhere in Pennsylvania, some school in Pennsylvania, but they did a study expecting republics to come out on top, but found that even when we compare monarchies in poorer parts of the world, such as Bhutan, Saudi Arabia, and such, they're more stable, have better property rights, and are more
Makes you
prosperous
think.
than
I think
all
our
your
ideologists should
Republican
take some
neighbors.
notes about the think tank with that. That's a really base statistic.
Seriously, and it's consistent. Like I said, it's consistent across the entire world. Bhutan, Thailand, if you consider their size when compared to their neighbors, are still more proportionally economically stable and prosperous than their neighbors.
Yeah, it all adds up to, and it's like you were saying, because technocracy is technically basically meritocracy, just very like a lot more specific. Now you can go into actual technocratic, like the OG technocratic outlook where, energy credits are used. I'm not that kind of technocrat. I just think technocracy is an important thing to have in some cases, and then aristocracy in some other cases. But, that's just my outlook. Um, is that what you is that all
Well,
on your
the
side?
energy credit, I want to comment on the energy credit thing because you brought it up now. That
Yeah.
is like super, super far future when
Yeah, that's like Star Trek level stuff. Like that's like a long time from now.
that's like the point when automation becomes so prevalent that, as I said earlier, the social contract breaks and we start asking the question of some goods are so cheap, why do we even bother selling them?
Hmm.
And at
And I
that
just
point,
think, from
energy
what I
credits.
think, is we should just shift into more creative practices, such as like, artists, and it would probably be a golden age for artists because there'd be a lot more because you'd have a lot less people working like that. But that's just kind of my opinion. Um,
We
Anything
will go.
else, and then we'll pass to Charles. I don't think there's anything else, but if you want to add a few more sentences, we can pass it to Charles because it's been a little while.
Of anything, and I'd love for Charles to take the stand.
Yes, the people love my sweet voice. No, I'm joking. Um, well, I see sort of, I guess, in my Jacobite, worldview, that ultimately worldly authority rests in the monarch. The monarch would a lot of the economic stuff would preferably be happening on a much more local level, but the monarch sort of as above any sort of court system, being in charge of the courts, would sort of be this sort of final appeal, if you will, for say
Mm.
property disputes, which obviously have some bearing on economics.
That's
Um,
why I think pardoning should be kept to with monarchs, because
mm,
actually the pardon would be a lot more fair in regards to having a monarch as opposed to a president, because you would
Oh,
have
absolutely.
depoliticized.
Look at what. Oh, absolutely. Look at what President Trump did with the pardon in his final days in office, and of course, every president before him has done that. I am sure that Biden will do that on his final days in office as well.
yeah.
Yep. All
And
right,
then
continue, Charles.
Yes. And obviously, as a Catholic, tithing is sort of a cool deal. A lot of so obviously the National Park Service and the Bureau of Land Management and all of these other federal lands, all these other elements that handle federal land, obviously the would sort of be the crownlands, which, if I'm not
Yeah.
mistaken, some of the public lands in New England and the other original colonies were actually originally crownlands owned by the British monarch
Yes.
before our revolution.
Yeah, this is, republics are constantly trying to reinvent the wheel, and they don't realize that it's actually a lot cheaper to have a monarch that's just a private business owner or a private landowner, that, rents out like swaths of land for hunting, just to view, tourism, stuff like that. And just from that, you can have a monarch, especially in the United States. $45 billion. And if maybe you can throw interstate commerce tax on that, maybe small amounts of that go to the monarch. Just from our platform, we have the monarch being the mediator between the states, so the monarch can get some money from that. But aside from that, there's no, like, income tax won't be a thing, at least for the executive.
Hmm.
Uh,
Yeah,
but yeah,
and
continue.
yes, I mean, so the monarch, I guess, it would definitely be a sort of a lead by example, because the royal family isn't just like the king isn't just father of the fatherland in the sense that he's supposed to be a father figure to the entire country, but he's also going to be literally a father, in charge of his own personal finance, and in that sense, he would sort of be a role model with how he handles things, and how frugally or unfrugally he lives, and how much he contributes to charity, which and this is something that I think all rulers need to comprehend, from my understanding, and I could be 100% wrong here, but if you're a public figure, what you do in public, especially if you're a ruler, has a bearing on your salvation, because if you're
Oh yeah.
making a complete mess of yourself, and really, monarchs should, anybody considering political office, you really need to get this through your head, and we all need to be reminded of this, because to a certain extent, everybody is going to have to deal with this. Um, y- if you govern badly, you risk going to hell. If I mean, like, not necessarily like you're just not a naturally capable ruler, but in the sense that you're a selfish, or you're a ruler who's only interested, not necessarily in the common good, but in your own narrow circle or whatnot. Like a to use the Aristotelian, a tyrant, or an oligarchy or whatnot. You gotta consider what you do. So I mean, and how that's gonna affect other people. What's the Bible quote? Uh, less it would be better for one of these who scandalized the little ones to have millstone thrown around. I can't remember the
Yep.
line. It was in the
We
readings
don't
a couple
make
weeks ago.
we don't make exceptions to monarchs, people. In
Yeah,
fact, we make the opposite.
yeah,
That's what
monarchs.
everybody that's what Republicans get wrong. Like, we're not adding exclusions to the monarch just because they're the leaders of the country. I mean, that's not what we do. Even to elected representatives, there should be more, under more pain of law, under more severe penalties. Yes, there should be some type of year multiplier when looking at, um, somebody that's in a public government office. I and Yeah, and it doesn't being a monarch doesn't change that.
Yeah,
It's
monarchs.
not.
You know, monarchs are people, so they're going to naturally suffer from some of the same failings that we suffer from. But the best monarchs of history, being Catholic, obviously, I'm to tend towards people like Blessed, Karl of Austria, And yes, it is Carl. I know in English we like to call him Charles, but whatever. I go with Carl. And Saint King Louis the Ninth. Okay, Saint King Louis the Ninth. They are, they led. One of the reasons they were good monarchs was because they upheld the church's social teaching, and they were exemplars, of it. Obviously, not the supreme exemplars. Obviously, Christ is the supreme exemplar of social teaching, but they were good exemplars of that teaching. And I guess that's all I had to say about
Yeah,
that.
Christ is the king, but the king, our earthly king, is merely the landlord for Christ. That's what I always thought.
Yeah.
He is the
And now
vassal of
we
Stewards
Christ.
of
will.
creation.
Okay, and
Do we want to have little questions period,
um,
or what are we
I'm
doing?
actually going to mention a breaking news topic that happened earlier
Oh,
Oh,
today.
oh, what is it?
we weren't
The
briefed.
granting granting a request by Republican attorneys general in Texas and Missouri,
Oh,
a federal judge in August ordered the Biden administration to reinstate the Remain in Mexico border program.
oh,
While it is appealing the decision and planning to terminate the policy a second time, the Biden administration is currently legally obligated to comply with the August court order in good faith. The Remain in Mexico policy will go back into effect in November. I would like everyone's very brief thoughts on that, and then we'll close.
Suck it, Biden!
Yeah, dang it. Sorry. Dang, it sucks, man. Oh my gosh. You don't get to invite people who haven't actually legally crossed the border into the country. God, that sucks, man.
gosh.
That's so terrible, dude. You can't have people illegally entering the country anymore.
You
God
can't
dang it, that just sucks,
you can't
man.
have people break the law because
I
it's
can't believe you can't illegally enter the country anymore. Oh my gosh, that's such a bad, terrible, disgusting thing.
This is the end of civilization as we know it. This is
God,
the end of
you can't
freedom.
respect what? You're gonna respect the American border? Oh my gosh, what are you nuts? What
salty
kind of country are we running here?
tears.
We should all have an open border.
Globalist
Let
tears.
everybody come in. Let everybody come in. Why not just let the Mexicans come in? Why not let the
I would like to point out that all of this is being said in sarcasm, in
Oh
case
yeah,
anybody was bad at detecting
I actually believe this. What are you talking about, Victor?
it.
It is a crying shame that we have to plead the law and respect things like, our sovereign territory. It's a crying shame.
What
All right, and,
me to be
and on
Huh?
a wonderful time for me to be a left-wing nationalist and point out how unhealthy large quantities of immigration is not only bad for our country, but is also bad for the countries the immigrants are leaving because it's
Well,
draining their
yeah,
labor
especially if we
capital
don't
from
have a
working
strong
with the illegal
assimilation
labor
system.
force. For the
Especially if we have a garbage assimilation process, which we do currently.
Yep. Plus, I'm also concerned for the moral, I guess, health of the people who, come up from Mexico because New World, I don't know. The Catholic Church, we haven't been doing a good job of catechizing people, but especially in a country that's like culturally Catholic, where they don't have to worry about actually debating Protestants, which is something you have to do quite frequently in this country. They
Well,
sort of come up here, and then the
yeah, that's a
Protestants are
thing.
like, "Hey, what about this?" And everybody's like, okay."
Yeah, you actually have like cultural Catholics coming over and getting converted to Protestantism. That happens a lot.
Which produces very bad results because us Catholics, we are a very my way or the highway sort of people because infallible truth and whatnot.
with regard
That's
to
why, yeah,
with regard to religion, I will make that point very clear here. And as long as everybody is okay, I move that we close, and we will
and a
close.
closing comment from Ixo, Plato is edible.
All
That's all I have to
right,
say.
and now we will, and now we
I concur.
will, and
People
now
think
And now we will close in prayer in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven.
Give
Give
us
us
this
this day
day
our
our
daily
daily bread,
bread.
and
Forgive
forgive
us
us
our
our
trespasses, as we
trespasses, as we
forgive
forgive
those who
those who
trespass
trespass
against us.
against
And
us.
lead us
Lead
not
us
into
not into
temptation,
temptation, but
but
deliver us from
deliver us
evil.
from
Amen.
evil. Amen.
In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. All right, everyone, for those of you listening to us on YouTube, join the Monarchist America Discord server. Link is in the description below. We record Fridays at 8 p.m. Eastern. And if you don't follow us on our other social media platforms, Twitter, Facebook, etc., links to them are also in the description down below. So until next week, may God bless you and may God bless the United States of America.